Welcome back to our channel. On today's video, we're going to be reviewing analytical information that shows that small towns in Florida are becoming more dangerous and that big cities are becoming safer. On today's video, we're going to be focusing on homicides and not so much on lesser crimes, since we've already done videos in the past that with analytical information show that it's the rural communities in Florida and suburban areas that are having the largest drug overdose death rates. Consider that it's the rural counties that give Florida a high overdose death rate, not the larger cities like Orlando, Tampa, Miami, which have very low rates. The exception really being the city of Jacksonville, both for drug overdose death rates as well as homicides. We can see that Duval County's murder rate is significantly higher than the state of Florida, sometimes going over 15 per 100,000, like in 2007 and 2020, two horrible years for the economy, crime, and everything in the United States. Yeah, in 2010, 2011, it seems like Jacksonville leveled out and had murder rates for the entire county at about 10 per 100,000. That's still above the state average, but it's better. Now here's Putnam County right outside of Jacksonville, and you can see that while there's years where they're below the state average, in 2020 and 2021, for 2 consecutive years, they were above 15 per 100,000, something that not even the city of Jacksonville has done. And on a state level, most of the larger cities and metropolitan areas, purple dots on this map, are in lower murder rate areas, with the exception of Jacksonville itself. When you look at Florida on a state level, you can clearly denote that it's the rural counties that are having the highest murder rates, like the dot of red in South Florida in the center. These are all rural counties. Yet the narrative being played in the media and in radio and TV stations is that small towns are safe. Take the Jason Aldean. People talking about being safe with their families. Try that in a small town. Feeling safe in your home. Try that in a small town. Having a low murder rate. Try that in a small town. Being black or Hispanic. Try that in a small town. People talking about helping the homeless and helping the poor. Try that in a small town. Yeah, we won't have any of that safety or equality out here. It would definitely happen in a small town. Maybe Okeechobee, maybe Glades, maybe Highlands, maybe Marion County up there. What's that, Putnam out there? That looks pretty scary. So what I want you guys to know is here's the real information, and here's a Jason Aldean song, which is basically, and well, the same thing can be said about rappers saying that their big cities like Broward and Dade or Duval are dangerous. If they really want to be from the hood, they may have to move to a small rural town to be able to analytically prove that they live in a bad area. But if you don't believe my version of the Jason Aldean song, take a look at this little small town. Now, most of the time, it was about the state average. But since 2014, there's been years where the murder rate has been above 40 per 100,000. That puts it on par with places like Detroit or St. Louis. And it's just a small little country county on Interstate 75 right before you get to Georgia. There's no big cities up there, but their murder rates are absolutely insane. Guys, that's roughly 2 times higher than Chicago. And if you guys remember, many months ago, I made a video about Alabama, and some of their rural counties had murder rates 4 times higher than Chicago. So the notion that small little rural places are safe is completely misleading. In Wakulla County, up in the Panhandle, murders were somewhat rare, and they've started to become more common. Now, the population of these rural counties are very small, and murders are kind of rare. So in those cases, we have to look at 10 or 20 counties at a time to be able to compare it to one urban county like Miami-Dade. But even in the frequency of murders over the years, when you just look at those rural areas, you can definitely see that there's been an increase in the last little bit, and murders and homicides have become much more common in small rural counties. When it comes to analytics, I like to use drug overdose deaths and murders because they have to report that to Florida Health and the state. When it comes to things like robberies, take the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, where if it's not an immediate threat to your safety, they won't come out, which analytically makes their city look like it's safer than other cities because simply the police is not actively going after criminals. Different states and different cities have different laws, so when you look at theft, crime, all those things, it's really insignificant since some states will even legalize things that are illegal in others. So how can you compare apples to apples? When it comes to overdose deaths, it shows you what drugs are actually doing to the community. And when you look at homicides, it definitely gives you a real life look at the worst types of crimes. There's no state that can hide a death. It has to be published, and that's why it's a great way to really look at how dangerous a place is. Here's rural Franklin County, Florida. They used to be safer than the state average. However, in the last period they reported, more dangerous than large cities like Chicago. I recently did a video where I explained that white murders are in the increase in Southwest Florida, and the backlash was so massive that I lost about 500 subscribers. However, it was a real topic, it was a real video, and there's real evidence. And since I've made the video, there's been even more white murders in Southwest Florida. It's one of those things that when you tell people a truth they don't want to hear, they just simply tune you out because they want to hear not what's real, not what's relevant, but they just want to hear what matches their narrative. And I'm not here to be a crowd pleaser. As you guys know, I moved to Alabama. I wanted that rural life. I still dream about living in the rural life, but I know that in reality and in practice, I have to live in a suburb or a large city because in small towns, it's a different type of story, especially being a minority. And now, blacks are starting to have higher incomes than whites in some counties in Florida, and Hispanics are having lower murder rates and lower drug addiction and death rates, which means that where there are Hispanics and blacks in Florida, the analytics are starting to shift. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places, there's analytical shifts that are making these communities, on paper, analytically, look a lot more attractive. There's no way to analytically prove this, but I think one of the biggest problems that Florida has is people from the North and the Midwest who retire in Florida, and then they die, their children inherit those properties, and now those children are living in those properties that their grandparents or parents retired in those places like Holiday, Florida, that used to be beautiful places all along US 19. These were places where people were retiring in Florida many decades ago. Today, some of the most dangerous and crime-ridden areas of the state. Why? Because I feel that it's not a natural thing for people to move to a place to die. They catered just to the needs of the elderly, and the young population was left with no access to good education, a huge problem in Florida. The state of Florida knows by now that by catering to these snowbirds and retiring people and not providing any help to the youth, the next generation comes out worse. And eventually, it's going to get so bad that Florida will be like a California where people, because of the cost of living or fear of crime, simply won't move to the state. Yet the state of Florida continues to the catering of demographics that today is what they want, but they're setting up the future to be a horrible place. That's why most of the worst, most crime-ridden places in Florida today, Titusville, Pasco County, places along US 19 where you have the most drug death overdoses, Ocala, Highlands County, places that were originally for affordable retirement back then, today have become completely unlivable crime-ridden areas. In 2023, Duval County looks like it's starting to decrease their murder rate in the long term. That will be a great thing if they're able to accomplish it. And it's almost like if the murders that were happening in Jacksonville shifted over into adjacent rural counties. In the last little bit, Hillsborough County, which is the city of Tampa, has also shown the tendency of a good reduction in murder rates. As you can see, they haven't had a really bad month in quite a bit. Sarasota County, which is also urban and one of the safest places in Florida analytically, is also looking like they're seeing a reduction. Miami-Dade County is also showing a reduction in murder rates. So we can see that on a month-to-month level, there's been a huge reduction roughly over the last 6 months in a lot of these Florida big cities. Take Hernando County, which is a rural county north of Tampa. You can see that their murder rates were completely growing, and then all of a sudden it stopped. Now you're probably wondering, why would that happen? What happened in the last 6 months in Florida that would decrease the murder rates? And the answer is simple. There's a new law, SB 1718, which was an immigration law, and it seems like for some reason it's kind of made murders significantly drop in a lot of areas. Those areas, namely, being the poorer regions of the state with the worst economies. So it seems that when those illegal immigrants left the state of Florida, there were new job openings, and perhaps many of the poor rural and poor inner city people were able to take up those positions. And it's possible that places like Hernando County and Tampa, Hillsborough were able to benefit from getting rid of the illegal immigrant population and inadvertently change their murder rates to have a much better outcome. Now, it's not that illegal immigrants themselves were causing the murders. It's the fact that you have more job openings that's helping people that were on the streets on a bad path have better opportunities. And you guys remember that I said that I thought this law would raise the murder rates. And it did for some people. But large cities, they actually benefited from it. Now, it would be great for the state of Florida if those analytics were to remain the same and that the murder rates in Florida took a nice dive. But I really doubt it for a few reasons. Since 2002, the murder rates in Florida have done nothing but rise slowly. And if the rural counties that saw an increase in their murder rates after 2020 are not able to correct that situation, the state's murder rate as a whole will continue to get worse and deteriorate. It still looks like most of these rural counties are showing an increase in their murder rates, not a decrease. You have to understand that most of the people that were living in Florida illegally were in two areas, big cities or adjacent suburbs, which means that these rural counties are likely not going to benefit very much from SB 1718 and its impact on illegal immigration because they didn't have illegal immigration to begin with. SB 1718 could, in the long run, make these rural places really suffer, and it could make big cities and suburbs start to thrive, which is kind of like shooting yourself in the foot. If you're a rural community, you got rid of illegal immigrants, great, but those jobs are opening up in cities, not in your small town, because your small town simply didn't have large illegal communities. And those small towns were already spiraling out of control with crime and murder, let alone drug addiction. Is what I'm saying here and the analytics that I'm showing you conclusive to you? Do you think what I say makes sense? Or do you think Jose lost his freaking mind? Let me know in the comment section. Also, just because you disagree with what I believe doesn't mean that you can't make a comment on my channel. You can comment and give me your opinions as long as your opinions are respectful. I don't mind if a subscriber who's been watching me for a long time disagrees with what I'm saying, as long as they go about it in a very respectful manner. When you become disrespectful or racist, that's when you get deported from my channel. A lot of people tell me they enjoy my videos, they like the information that I bring forth, they just don't agree with my conclusions. But I'm not afraid to say when I'm wrong. Like in the case of showing you this analytic that shows that since 1718 took place, now we're seeing a reduction in murder rates. I didn't expect that. I expected the complete opposite. But now that it took place, we see the analytics. I'm showing you guys the analytics that prove me wrong in the past. I'm not afraid to admit I'm wrong when I'm wrong. However, I do find it interesting that in a lot of specific neighborhoods where the illegals were, in those neighborhoods, it really has become a war zone. Take parts of Lee County that I mentioned, take here in Bradenton, where we've seen just a conjunction of murders in the same neighborhoods. But my perspective is looking at inner city neighborhoods on these videos. Some of those specific neighborhoods really have gone to crap. But when you scope out, zoom out, and look at the entire state, we're starting to see a reduction in murder rates. I've also noticed that the higher the population density and the more people around, the more likely murders are to happen. For example, in the state of Florida, it's during the winter months when we have most of the murders. That's when the snowbirds are down and the roads are packed. When you look at West Texas to North Dakota, all along the empty part of the country, they have lower murder rates, which goes to show that the more you increase the population density, the more murders it leads to. And it's possible that opening up all those houses, opening up all those jobs, creating less population density in the cities, because some of these cities like Tampa, Miami, really did empty out. It's possible by reducing that population density threshold that you're able to reduce the murder rate. However, there's some exceptions to that. For example, the city of Hialeah has one of the highest population densities and lowest murder rates. So that raises a question about that hypothesis, doesn't it? All right, guys, so next week we'll have Dale Gribble on our show, and he's going to explain to you guys his theory on how Cubans are going to destroy the cheese industry in Wisconsin. I hope you guys tune in for that. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Rectification. It's going to be Rusty Shackelford. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hope you guys tune in for that. Yeah, we won't have any of that safety or equality out here.